For a long time, the Varkolian Empire believed they were unmatched in the stars. Their ships traveled farther than any other civilization, crossing dark regions of space where light itself seemed to fade. They had explored hundreds of systems, settled dozens of worlds, and created a network of stations that stretched like a chain across the galaxy. Wherever their ships arrived, other species either made peace with them or stepped aside. The Varkolians didn't rule through cruelty. They ruled because everyone knew their fleet was the strongest. Their ships were made of living metal that healed itself. Their engines used star cores as power sources. Their sensors could detect movements from thousands of kilometers away. They had won so many battles that their commanders no longer remembered the taste of fear to the Varkolians. The galaxy was already decided. Every sector had its place. Every species knew its role. And the center of that balance was their empire. Life inside their territory was stable, predictable, and peaceful. Most of their citizens never even thought about war. They grew up hearing old stories of long-ago enemies, but no one had challenged them for generations. It felt as if the galaxy had accepted the Varkolians as the natural rulers of the stars. Because of this long period of peace, few of them paid attention to the small blue planet on the far edge of a quiet spiral arm. It was so far from major trade routes, and so far from the Empire's borders, that it barely appeared on their maps. The planet's official designation was simple: Sol 3, a minor world with no known influence. Another place with basic life forms learning to use technology. Almost no one in the Empire believed that such a planet could matter, but there were a few Varkolian explorers who were curious. They traveled farther than their official missions required, drawn by rumors and strange signals. These explorers were often dismissed by Empire leaders as dreamers, the kind of people who chased interesting stories instead of real threats. Yet these same explorers were the first to send reports about human beings, who were still new to the wider galaxy, but were advancing with unusual speed. The first report wasn't taken seriously. It described humans as a species that learned faster than expected, built things quickly, and pushed limits even when they didn't fully understand the risks. The report mentioned that humans had created engines that should have taken them 2 more centuries to develop. The Varkolian Council joked about it. Many of them believed the explorer must have misread his instruments or found some old alien machines and assumed they were human creations. The idea that someone else could progress so fast seemed unrealistic. Months later, another explorer sent a message. This one described a small human vessel traveling at a speed normally impossible for such a tiny craft. Again, the Council doubted the report. Maybe it was a glitch in readings. Maybe the explorer had mistaken some other species' technology. Yet the reports kept coming. Each one shared the same theme. Humans were moving forward faster than anyone predicted. They weren't simply building ships, they were reinventing them. They weren't just exploring, they were reaching into regions of space no young species usually dared to enter. And they weren't afraid of danger. If anything, they pushed toward it. Eventually, one report reached the Varkolian High Command that they couldn't ignore. It described a skirmish between a Varkolian patrol vessel and an unknown ship from Earth. The patrol vessel wasn't destroyed, but it suffered damage unlike anything the Varkolian engineers had ever seen. The hull had been dented inward by some kind of gravitational pressure, something that wasn't supposed to be possible for a ship of that size. The unknown human vessel had disappeared before they could scan it fully. This was the first sign that something about Earth was different. Inside the Varkolian Empire, discussions began to turn more serious. Leaders who once dismissed the early reports now asked for more information. Some worried that humans were getting stronger too fast. Others said it was just a phase, that humans would eventually slow down like every other species. But even these optimistic voices couldn't ignore the pattern. Humans didn't stop. They didn't pause. They adapted, learned, built, and improved nonstop. The Varkolians admired discipline and order. To them, the behavior of humans looked chaotic, almost reckless. But beneath that chaos was something powerful, a drive to overcome limitations. Humans didn't accept the idea of impossible. They kept pushing, often succeeding in ways no one expected. Despite all this, the Varkolians still didn't feel threatened. They were the rulers of the stars, after all. They had the strongest fleet in recorded history. Their empire was stable, wealthy, and technologically advanced. Even if humans grew stronger, they were still far behind, or so the Varkolians believed. But there were a few Varkolian scientists who didn't share this confidence. They tried to warn the Council that humans were advancing at a pace the galaxy had never seen before. They showed calculations predicting that humans could surpass certain Varkolian technologies in less than a century. But the Council brushed these warnings aside. They argued that their empire had survived countless threats, many far more dangerous than a young species from a distant star dot, so the empire remained calm. Life continued as usual. Their ships patrolled the usual routes, their stations operated smoothly, and their citizens lived without any worry. Humans were seen as curious newcomers, interesting but irrelevant. No one felt the need to prepare for conflict. No one believed humans would ever challenge the rulers of the stars. What the Varkolians didn't realize was that Earth wasn't building just better ships. Earth was working on something massive, something unique, something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, and thinkers from Earth had come together for a project so large that even their own people didn't fully understand its purpose at first. They only knew that it was meant to protect humanity's future. If the Varkolians had seen the giant structure growing in the shadows of Earth's moon, maybe they would have taken the warnings more seriously. Maybe they would have prepared. But they didn't know. Their explorers never got close enough to see it. Their sensors didn't reach that far. And Earth was very careful about hiding its greatest achievement at night. Human workers on the lunar surface would look up at the stars and hope that what they were building would be enough. They knew the galaxy wasn't empty. They knew powerful civilizations existed. And they knew that someday, someone out there might see Earth as a threat or as an opportunity. Below them, on the blue planet, people lived their normal lives, not knowing that history was already changing. They didn't know that decisions being made in quiet rooms and secret labs would soon shape the fate of their entire species. They didn't know that a distant empire already considered them unusual, maybe even dangerous in the Varkolian Empire. Meanwhile, ships came and went, as they always had. No one imagined that their long era of peace was approaching its first real test in generations. To them, humans were still a mysterious, fast-growing civilization far away, nothing more. They had no idea that Earth was preparing a ship so large, so advanced, and so powerful that even the mighty Varkolian Armada would hesitate when they finally saw it. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. For now, the rulers of the stars lived confidently, unaware that the edges of their peaceful galaxy were slowly beginning to shift. They didn't know that a single encounter in the future would challenge everything they believed about power, about progress, and about who truly ruled the stars. For a long time, the Varkolian Empire treated the reports about humans as background, noise, something worth noting, but not worth worrying about. But as more explorers returned with updates, small whispers began to move through the empire. These whispers didn't make anyone panic, but they did make people curious. Stories of humans pushed from quiet conversations into council meetings, and even citizens on distant stations began asking questions. One of the early reports that caught attention came from a small Varkolian research vessel. They described humans testing new engines that seemed too advanced for their age as a species. According to old galactic records, a civilization was supposed to pass through certain stages slowly basic rockets, small ships, and larger ones. But humans didn't follow that pattern. Instead of taking centuries to improve, they seemed to leap forward every few years. Most Varkolian leaders assumed humans were copying someone else's work. Maybe another species was helping them. That idea felt more comfortable than admitting humans were advancing on their own. But as months passed, the evidence didn't match that explanation. Humans were doing things their own way. They built strange-looking ships with designs other species had never tried. Their technology looked messy at first glance, full of odd shapes and unusual angles, but when studied closely, it showed surprising creativity. There was something almost stubborn about human engineering. When they wanted something to work, they kept trying until it did, even if they had to build it in a completely new way. Some Varkolian scientists secretly admired this. They said humans might be unpredictable, but unpredictability could be a kind of strength. Still, the High Command remained confident. Their empire had survived larger threats. Why worry about a species that had only begun exploring space a short time ago? But then another report arrived that was impossible to ignore. A Varkolian patrol ship had encountered an unknown human vessel in deep space. It wasn't a battle. It wasn't even a hostile moment. But the way the human ship moved shocked everyone who reviewed the data. It accelerated too quickly, like it was bending the rules of physics. It stopped with perfect precision, something that normally required huge amounts of computing power. And then it vanished from sensors as if it had turned invisible. The patrol ship had never seen anything like it. The crew recorded everything carefully. When they returned home, the High Command replayed the footage again and again. Even the Emperor requested to see it. That alone showed how unusual the situation had become. Some leaders dismissed it again, calling it a trick of light or a scanning error. But others couldn't ignore the pattern forming. Over the next year, the Empire received more messages, different explorers, different regions, different situations, but all carrying the same message. Humans were growing stronger at an astonishing speed. Soon the rumors spread beyond the scientists and the council. On Varkolian trade routes, merchants discussed humans while loading cargo. Station workers shared stories over meals. Students studying galactic history asked teachers why humans were accelerating faster than any recorded species. Even though no one felt afraid, everyone felt something shifting. One question kept appearing in these conversations. How were humans doing this so quickly? The Varkolians had always believed that technological progress followed a straight, predictable path. That belief was part of their culture. They planned everything carefully, step by step, and they assumed every species would rise in the same slow, steady way. Humans didn't seem to follow any plan. They jumped stages. They mixed old ideas with new ones. They made breakthroughs when no one expected them. They weren't afraid of mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes led to discoveries. Some Varkolian scholars began to study human behavior more closely. They watched recordings from Earth people, working, building, arguing, celebrating, trying again and again. They realized humans had a strange combination of curiosity and determination. When something went wrong, they didn't stop. They tried new methods, sometimes even multiple methods at once. It wasn't always logical, but it worked. A few scholars wrote papers about this. They suggested humans might rise faster than other species because they didn't fear failure the way most civilizations did. The papers were polite, full of careful language. But one idea stood out. Humans were unpredictable, not because they were chaotic, but because they were brave enough to experiment without limits. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some Varkolian officials believed these scholars were overly impressed. They said humans were simply enthusiastic beginners, nothing more. They insisted that once humans reached the tougher stages of space development, they would slow down. But the universe wasn't matching their expectations. Then came the event that changed everything. It happened near the border of Varkolian territory. A long-range listening station detected a sudden burst of energy, something they had never seen before. It was as if a star had flickered for a moment. But the signal wasn't natural. It came from a ship. When analysts examined the data, they discovered something extraordinary. The energy burst came from a human experiment, and whatever they were testing almost matched the output of a full Varkolian warship. That news spread through the Empire like a wave. No one panicked, but everyone felt the difference. For the first time in a very long time, the Varkolians realized that another species was catching up quickly, maybe faster than anyone had ever predicted. Still, the High Command tried to calm the Empire. They released a short statement saying humans were active explorers, nothing more. They assured citizens that the Empire remained stable and powerful. They pointed out that humans had no history of aggression and were simply curious travelers. Deep down, many Varkolians accepted this explanation because it kept life simple, but there were some who felt uneasy. They didn't consider humans dangerous, just unknown. And unknown things had the power to shape the future. Back on Earth, meanwhile, humanity felt something too. When their deep space sensors detected Varkolian activity near the edges of the solar system, Earth's leaders realized their presence in the galaxy was no longer a secret. They had entered what some scientists quietly called the attention zone, a point in time when a young species becomes noticed by older civilizations. Earth had prepared for this moment, not because they expected war, but because they wanted to survive in a galaxy full of powerful societies. Humans hoped to explore peacefully, but they also understood that not everyone they met would welcome them kindly. History on Earth had already taught them that lesson many times. So the project near the moon continued at full speed. Engineers worked long shifts, adjusting enormous metal rings and powering massive energy cores. They kept the project hidden behind artificial shadows, using thick layers of shielding to block signals. They didn't want anyone, especially the Varkolians, to learn about what they were building too early. They knew that someday a meeting would happen in the Varkolian Empire. Some citizens began asking their leaders more questions. What did they know about Earth? What did humans want? Could a young species truly advance faster than an ancient one? The council didn't have answers. They sent more scouts, more researchers, and more diplomatic signals into the surrounding regions. But every time they reached farther toward Earth, something strange happened. Human ships either avoided contact or disappeared before scanning systems could lock onto them. The humans weren't hiding, but they weren't showing everything either. It was a careful balance, the kind you keep when you're preparing for something important. The Varkolian High Command held many meetings behind closed doors. They didn't reveal everything to the public, but even without full details, citizens could sense a shift in the air. For the first time in generations, the Empire was studying another civilization seriously. And as each new report arrived, the same idea returned again and again. Humans were not ordinary. Their progress didn't follow any known pattern. Their behavior didn't match any model. Their technology didn't fit into neat categories. Some Varkolians found this exciting. Others found it uncomfortable. But no one could ignore it anymore. Across the galaxy, the feeling was subtle, but real, like a quiet wind before the start of a new season. The Varkolian Empire still believed they ruled the stars, but now they understood they were no longer alone in the role of rising power. Someone else was climbing fast, almost too fast to measure. And the moment when these two paths would finally meet was getting closer with each passing day. For months, the Varkolian Empire studied every new signal coming from the region where Earth was located. Most of the signals were faint, just tiny bursts of energy that faded quickly. But then something unusual happened. A large movement appeared near the Sol system, something so big it couldn't be ignored. The High Command gathered their analysts, engineers, and navigators to study it. They replayed the data many times, each time more confused. Whatever humans were building near their moon wasn't a normal station, shipyard, or relay. It was larger than any structure a young species had ever created. And it wasn't shaped like anything the Varkolians recognized. The readings suggested a massive frame, thick layers of metal, and an energy core strong enough to power a small fleet. No one knew what it was for. Some thought it might be a planetary shield. Others said it was a transport hub. A few believed humans were attempting a megastructure, something usually built by ancient civilizations. Not newcomers. The uncertainty bothered the Varkolian leaders. They didn't like unknowns. They preferred charts, predictions, and order. Humans were anything but predictable. So the High Command made a decision. They would send a group of ships toward Earth, not to threaten them, but to observe the situation more closely. The fleet they sent was small enough not to cause alarm, yet strong enough to show the Empire's authority. These ships traveled quietly across space, entering regions no Varkolian vessel had visited in a long time. Back on Earth, human sensors immediately picked up the approaching ships. The alerts spread through command centers, research labs, and military stations. People weren't surprised. They had been expecting this moment. For months, they had watched Varkolian activity grow around their system. They knew the Empire's curiosity had finally reached its peak. Earth's leaders didn't want conflict. Their goal was to protect humanity, not to start a fight. But they also couldn't ignore a powerful fleet approaching their home. So they activated the project they had been working on, the one hidden behind the shadows of the moon. Although the world didn't know the details, a small group of engineers and specialists had spent years creating something special. They worked long nights with little rest, adjusting panels, running simulations, and solving problems that had never been attempted before. They believed humanity needed a way to defend itself, not because they wanted dominance, but because they wanted to survive in a galaxy filled with ancient powers. When the approaching Varkolian fleet reached the edge of the solar system, the humans were ready. The fleet slowed down. The Varkolian commanders expected to see small patrol ships or basic defense platforms. They expected a young species to panic or hide. But what they saw on their screens made everyone fall silent. A shadow moved behind the moon slow at first, then clearer as it left the darkness. The Varkolians stared at their displays, unsure if their systems were malfunctioning. But the readings were correct. A massive human starship emerged from behind the moon. It was so large that it seemed almost unreal. Its hull was made of black alloy that absorbed light, giving it a calm but intimidating presence. Huge engines glowed softly, and the surface of the ship shimmered like a living structure. It was unlike anything the Varkolian Empire had seen. This was the Colossus. Even though the Varkolian fleet had seen countless ships across the galaxy, the Colossus felt different. It wasn't just big, it was purposeful. Every part of it was built with intention, as if humanity had poured every ounce of creativity, fear, hope, and courage into one vessel. Inside the Varkolian command ship, the crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had never expected humans to build something so advanced, especially in such a short time. The commander asked for more scans. The ship's analysts checked the readings again. Everything confirmed the same result. The human vessel was incredibly strong, possibly stronger than the combined strength of the Varkolian ships present. But the Colossus didn't fire any weapons. It didn't rush forward. It simply moved into view, silent and steady, as if making a statement without saying a word. Then a human transmission arrived. Only 4 words appeared on every Varkolian screen: stand down or advance. The words weren't aggressive. They weren't threatening. They were clear and calm, leaving the choice entirely to the Varkolians. The message showed confidence, not arrogance, but certainty that humanity had built something capable of holding its ground. The Varkolian commander didn't know how to respond. He wasn't a warmonger. His mission wasn't to start conflict. But he also carried the pride of his empire, which had ruled the stars for centuries. If he retreated, it would signal weakness. If he advanced, it might cause misunderstanding. The crew discussed their options quietly, aware that any wrong move could change the future of both civilizations. On the human side, people watched the situation unfold from Earth and the moon base. Engineers stood beside their machines, officers monitored screens, and workers waited in quiet rooms, hoping for a peaceful outcome. Everyone felt the weight of the moment. They knew the Colossus wasn't just a ship, it was a message that humanity was no longer defenseless. The Varkolian fleet slowly adjusted its formation, drifting closer to the Colossus. They didn't raise weapons or shield systems. They simply advanced cautiously. It was a test. They wanted to see how the human vessel would react to their surprise. The Colossus didn't respond with fear or aggression. It held its position, stabilizing itself with smooth, deliberate movements. This calmness made the Varkolian crew uneasy. They weren't used to seeing young civilizations behave with such confidence. The Varkolian commander sent a private message to his council. He described the Colossus in detail, its size, its structure, its energy readings. He explained that humans had reached a stage of technological growth far ahead of expectations. Back in the Varkolian capital, the High Command gathered once again. They discussed everything: the reports from explorers, the strange signals, and now this giant vessel. The room was filled with silent tension. Many of them felt something they hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. Some officials believed the humans were bluffing. Others believed the humans had created something truly powerful. A few quietly suggested starting diplomatic talks. For the first time in generations, different voices in the Empire disagreed strongly. But even with all the debate, no one could deny the most important fact: humanity had surprised them all. The Colossus continued drifting in front of the Varkolian fleet. Its dark hull reflected the sunlight in slow waves, and strange patterns of energy moved across its surface. The ship seemed calm, patient, almost alive. It didn't act like a weapon ready to strike. It acted like a guardian, steady, watchful, and confident. Inside the Varkolian fleet, the crew members began to whisper among themselves. Some said humans must have received help from an older species. Others said humans had unlocked something new. A few felt a strange respect. The galaxy had just shown them a new possibility. Young civilization building something great through determination and teamwork. The commander knew what he had to do. He sent a message back to the Colossus. The message contained no threats or demands. It was simple and respectful, acknowledging the human presence and asking for peaceful communication. It was the first step toward understanding. On Earth, the message brought relief. Many people had feared the worst, but the Varkolians had chosen to talk instead of act impulsively. Scientists, leaders, and workers shared a quiet moment of pride. The Colossus had done what it was built to do: protect without provoking, defend without dominating. But even after the tension faded, everyone knew this was only the beginning. Both civilizations had revealed something important to each other. The Varkolians now understood that humans were rising fast, maybe faster than anyone in the galaxy. And humans understood that the galaxy was full of eyes watching them, measuring their strength and intentions. And yet, in this moment, in the shadow of the Colossus, neither side attacked. Neither side panicked. They simply looked at each other across the silence of space, knowing the future would be shaped by what happened next. When the giant ship from Earth drifted closer to the Star Union's border, the entire region seemed to hold its breath. Every station, every outpost, every scanner post froze on its readings. No one had ever seen anything like it before. Even the oldest commanders, Those who had lived long enough to see 3 wars and countless crises could not make sense of this calm, quiet colossus that moved as if nothing in the galaxy could touch it. Inside the Union's main command hall, the atmosphere was thick with stress. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder as they studied the growing image of the Earthship on the giant screen. No one spoke loudly. No one even shifted much. It felt as if any sudden movement might break the thin thread of control holding the room together. The commander of the Halari fleet kept her eyes fixed on the display. She had been confident all her life, but she had never imagined seeing a ship that looked more like a moving mountain than a machine. Her fleet had intimidated entire star systems. Yet this single ship, silent, dark, almost peaceful, made them all feel like insects staring at a storm. One of her officers finally whispered what everyone else was too afraid to say. "If that thing fires, we cannot defend against it." The commander didn't respond right away. She knew it was true. Every calculation her analysts had run said the same thing. Their Armada could not take even one direct hit from whatever power source this ship used. The shield readings alone didn't make sense. It was like trying to understand an equation written in a language no one had ever seen before. But the commander also knew something else. The Union had a rule: never attack first unless the enemy showed clear intent to harm. And so far, the Colossus had done nothing threatening. It did not charge weapons. It did not even speed up. It simply glided forward with slow confidence, as if it knew exactly where it was headed. In the middle of the confusion, one officer noticed something strange. "Commander, their ship isn't hiding its energy signatures." That was rare. In fact, it was unheard of. Every military ship masked its power sources during tense situations. But here, the massive Earthship openly broadcast every reading, almost as if it wanted the Union to see exactly what it was made of. As if it had nothing to fear, the commander leaned closer, narrowing her eyes. "Run a deeper scan." The officers did. What they found made the entire room even more silent than before. The ship's energy core pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Its shields were layered in ways the Union had never imagined. Its hull was made of materials no one could identify. And its engines, those strange, quiet engines, barely seemed to burn fuel at all. Someone finally said, "Commander, are we sure this is a warship?" That question hung in the air. For the first time, someone said out loud what many had silently wondered. A ship built only for war would look harsher, more aggressive. But this one didn't. It looked more like a symbol, like something made to remind the galaxy of power, not necessarily to destroy it. A message suddenly blinked on the communication panel. It was from the Earth Colossus. The commander straightened. Her voice trembled as she said, "Put it through." The entire hall froze, waiting. A soft humming filled the speakers, followed by a calm voice. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't demanding. It sounded almost gentle, as if the speaker wanted to avoid causing fear. "This is the Earth vessel Colossus. We come with a proposal." Just hearing the voice made several officers blink in confusion. They had expected threats. They had expected demands. They had expected the tone of someone who knew they held all the power. But instead, the voice sounded normal, peaceful even. The commander cleared her throat. "This is the Halari fleet. State your purpose." "We request safe passage to the neutral zone," the voice replied calmly. "We wish to meet with the Star Union leadership to discuss a matter important to all parties." The commander exchanged confused looks with her officers. A meeting? That was all? Why send a ship this big just to ask for a meeting? She asked the obvious question. Why send a vessel of such scale? There was a pause. Then the voice responded, "Because the matter concerns the stability of the entire galaxy." That sentence traveled through the room like a wave. Officers whispered. Analysts typed frantically. The commander's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What matter?" she asked quietly. "We will share it only in person," the voice responded politely. "But we assure you, we do not seek conflict." The commander didn't reply right away. She turned off the microphone and faced her second-in-command. "What do you think?" she asked. The officer hesitated before answering. "If they wanted to attack us, Commander, they would have done so already." It was true. The Colossus had every chance to strike first. It hadn't moved its weapons. It hadn't changed its course. It hadn't even raised its shields beyond a basic level. It moved like something ancient and wise, like something that didn't feel threatened by anything around it. After a long moment of thought, the commander sighed. "Prepare a response." They opened the line again. The commander spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. "We will allow passage, but you will be escorted by our ships. Any deviation from the path, and we will treat it as a breach of trust." "Understood," the voice said. "We accept your terms." And just like that, the hall let out a breath it didn't know it was holding. As the communication ended, the officers finally began to move again. Some rushed to update protocols. Others calculated the escort route. A few remained frozen, still trying to process the last few minutes. The commander watched her fleet take formation around the giant Earthship. Her screens now showed her own vessels flying beside the Colossus, tiny compared to its massive size. It felt surreal, almost dreamlike, to see their proud ships dwarfed so completely. Yet despite everything, the Colossus acted like a polite traveler. It didn't speed ahead. It didn't test their boundaries. It matched their pace perfectly, moving as if it respected the space around it. Officers monitored every inch of the escort path. No one relaxed, but somewhere inside, a small sense of ease began to grow. If Earth wished harm, it would have shown signs by now. But instead, the ship behaved with calm confidence, letting the Union observe its every move. One officer whispered to a colleague, "Maybe Earth isn't what the old stories say." Another replied softly, "Maybe they changed." The commander heard them, but said nothing. Her own thoughts were tangled. She had been raised on tales of Earth as a dangerous power that vanished long ago. Now she was seeing something different, something that did not match any story she had known. Hours passed, and the escort finally reached the boundary of the neutral zone. The Union's main council station floated ahead, glowing with bright lights and steady energy. It was the center of political power for countless worlds. The Colossus slowed as it approached, its engines humming softly like a calm breath. The commander opened a channel once more. "Earth vessel, you have arrived at the designated location." The calm voice replied, "Thank you for your cooperation. The next steps will help decide the future of our galaxy." And with those words, the Colossus prepared to deliver whatever message had brought it across the stars. But no one, neither the Halari fleet, nor the Union Council, nor the observers from distant worlds, could have predicted the truth Earth was about to reveal, because it wasn't a threat. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even an ultimatum. It was something far greater, something that would rewrite everything the galaxy believed. When the Colossus finally powered down its main systems after the long encounter, everyone on Earth felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The tension had lasted for days, and people had barely slept. News channels kept updates running constantly. Families stayed awake together, and workers who had helped build the giant starship watched the final reports with tired smiles. Many didn't celebrate loudly. They were too drained, but deep inside, they felt a quiet pride. Humanity had survived its first true test among the stars. In the Varkolian Empire, things felt different. The Empire had ruled for centuries, confident and steady. But the sight of the Colossus had shaken something inside them. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Their citizens couldn't stop talking about it. Everywhere from small food stalls to massive stations, people whispered about the human ship that stood still against an entire armada. Some felt threatened, some felt impressed, and some felt curious. But everyone felt something new. The Varkolian Council held meeting after meeting. They reviewed the recordings repeatedly. They studied every tiny detail, every hull vibration, every engine pulse, every line of the human message. Their engineers examined the energy readings, trying to figure out how humans had built a ship so powerful in such a short time. They didn't reach a full answer, but one thing became clear. Humans were no longer a small, distant species. They were a rising power, and the Empire had to decide how to approach them. The Emperor asked for a full report. The Council presented everything honestly. They didn't hide their surprise, and they didn't pretend to know everything. For the first time in a long time, they admitted they were uncertain. The Emperor listened quietly, hands folded, eyes thoughtful. When the Council finished, he simply said that the Empire must not treat this moment as a threat, but as a turning point. Back on Earth, leaders met with scientists, diplomats, and engineers to plan their next steps. They didn't want to act proudly or aggressively. They knew the galaxy was full of civilizations older and stronger than themselves. The Colossus wasn't built to scare others. It was built to protect humanity while opening the door to peaceful relationships. People all over the world talked about the Varkolian encounter in homes, shops, parks, and workplaces. Children drew pictures of stars and giant ships. Teenagers made short videos explaining the event in their own words. Elders smiled quietly, saying they always knew humans would reach the stars someday. Some people were nervous, wondering if peace would last. Others felt excited, dreaming about future alliances and friendships. The Colossus itself became a symbol for humanity, not of power, but of unity. It had been built by thousands of hands, countless minds, and millions of people supporting the project from afar. Every bolt, every wire, every panel carried the effort of humanity working together. Seeing it stand firmly against an ancient empire reminded people what they were capable of when they cooperated. Weeks passed, and then something unexpected happened. The Varkolian Empire sent a formal message to Earth, not from a fleet, not from a patrol, but from the highest level of their government. The message was simple, respectful, and clear. They wanted dialogue. They wanted to understand humans better, and they wanted to share knowledge rather than hide behind distance. When the message arrived, the Colossus lit up again, powering its communication systems. The beam of light sent back toward the Varkolian capital wasn't a warning, it was an answer. Humanity accepted the peaceful approach. This moment didn't appear dramatic from the outside. It didn't come with music or flashing lights. It happened quietly, like many important things in history. But inside, both sides felt a shift. The first true bridge between Earth and the Varkolian Empire had been built. Months later, small diplomatic vessels began traveling between them. They weren't large warships or grand displays, just simple, safe transports carrying translators, scientists, cultural advisors, and observers. The first meeting took place on neutral ground, a calm station floating in open space. The atmosphere was uncertain at first, but it slowly warmed as both sides realized they shared more similarities than expected. They both valued cooperation. They both valued knowledge. They both cared deeply about protecting their people. The Varkolians were surprised to learn how much humans had achieved during their short time in space. They were even more surprised to learn how much struggle and difficulty humanity had overcome. Humans told stories of disasters they survived, challenges they faced, and how each generation built upon the work of the last. The Varkolians listened with quiet respect. Humans, in return, learned about the Varkolian Empire's long history, how it grew, how it maintained peace, and how it protected different species within its borders. They learned the Empire was not cruel. It was simply structured, cautious, and deeply committed to order. The more the two civilizations talked, the more they understood each other. The fear and tension slowly faded, replaced by curiosity and rising trust. Meanwhile, the Colossus stayed near the moon, drifting like a silent guardian. It continued to be improved, tested, and studied. Humans didn't upgrade it to become stronger. They upgraded it to become safer, smarter, and more efficient. The ship had become a living symbol of Earth's promise. We will explore the galaxy, but we will do it with respect. Over time, Varkolians grew curious enough to request a closer look at the Colossus. They wanted to understand how it was built, not to copy it, but to appreciate the creativity behind it. Humans agreed, but in controlled, careful steps. The first Varkolian delegation that approached the ship was full of scientists with wide, fascinated eyes. They looked at the giant alloy plates, the complex engine structure, the quiet but powerful energy core. One Varkolian engineer placed a hand gently on the surface of the ship. The metal felt cool and steady. She whispered that she had never seen such a balance of strength and elegance in one structure. The human engineers standing nearby smiled silently, proud of their creation. The visit didn't end with fear, it ended with admiration. As years passed, the events at the moon became a cornerstone of galactic history. Scholars wrote about it. Students studied it. Families told the story to their children, not as a tale of war, but of understanding of two civilizations meeting for the first time and choosing peace even when misunderstanding could have led to conflict. Varkolian Empire began working with Earth on small joint projects, scientific missions, shared research, cultural exchanges. Human students traveled to Varkolian academies, and Varkolian scholars visited Earth's laboratories. Slowly, bridges formed, quiet but strong. Humanity had stepped into the galaxy not with fear, but with determination and open hands. The Colossus remained, not as a threat, but as a guardian, ensuring that peace stayed balanced. Whenever humans looked at it, they didn't see a weapon. They saw a reminder of what they could achieve when they united. And when the Varkolians looked at it, they no longer saw a challenge to their rule. They saw a partner. They saw a species with potential, courage, and heart. In time, the story spread far beyond Earth and the Varkolian worlds. Other civilizations heard about it and admired the restraint and wisdom shown by both sides. The galaxy slowly shifted, becoming a place where communication mattered more than power, where cooperation mattered more than fear. Many years later, people still remembered the moment when the rulers of the stars met the rising power of Earth. They remembered how easily things could have gone wrong, and how carefully both sides stepped back from the edge. They remembered the message that had echoed across the Varkolian fleet: simple, steady, and strong. Stand down or advance. But they also remembered the choice that followed: understanding. The galaxy didn't change overnight. It changed because two civilizations saw each other clearly and chose a better path. And at the center of this change stood humanity, once small, once ignored, now a respected voice among the stars. Not because of power, not because of fear, but because of unity, courage, and the quiet strength to reach for peace even when the unknown waited in the darkness.